Hello everyone, I am Brianna Boyd and welcome to my breakout session, Creative Solutions for Panel Systems. I am a senior designer for 5-Star Office Furniture. I have been with them for almost 5 years now and I am currently on my way to becoming CET certified. I went to Georgia Southern University and got a Bachelor of Science in Interior Design with a concentration in environmental sustainability. I love to design, and I am incredibly excited to be here, especially since this is my first time attending CETX. It is also my first time presenting at such a large-scale conference. I'm looking forward to sharing some of my knowledge that I have gained over the years, and I hope everyone will learn something new with me today. So jumping right on in with our topics. For Creative Solutions for Panel Systems, we will be covering layouts, overlapping spaces in multi-use panels, panel design and elements, finishes and materials, how to design without smart symbols, and budget-friendly solutions. For our additional space division options, we will be talking about floor screens and dividers, ceiling-mounted screens, and planters. I will also be covering a couple of technicalities of panel design. So for your layouts, you're going to want to start with a sketch or reference typicals online or just play around with the options in CET. I prefer to reference typicals online. Those are a resource provided to us as a point of reference, so I like to take advantage of those. I will either download the typical if they have a file available to me, or I just go ahead and build it from scratch and just adjust my sizes and storage as needed. CET makes it incredibly easy to design and edit those panels and edit those workstations. So because of that, you can quickly and efficiently just start developing those layouts, right? While you are developing your typicals, make sure to take your panel height into account. And as always, be sure to design with the end user in mind. So you'll want to be sure to include items such as ergonomic accessories, sit stand capabilities, wire management, and task lighting. So here in the top left is a typical that I referenced online. I love the pantry storage that provided privacy, but I wanted a bit more privacy and a bit more storage, so I redesigned it to be exactly what was needed. I added a PET privacy screen with integrated wire management. As you all know, PET is a nice, lightweight solution for height adjustable tables, and it will of course help with sound absorption too. I think perhaps one of my favorite things about this typical is how nicely everything aligns, right? So the PET screens align with the 42-inch high panels when in a seated position, and the height adjustable surface aligns with the panels and pantry storage when in a standing position. I especially like that because they can use the top of the pantry for just a little extra space in case they need to kind of spread out a little bit more, right? Panels are 42 inches high and 50 inches high, and the PET screen is 12. The 50-inch high panels were added so that the shelf would align with the bottom of the center-mounted overheads, and I also went ahead and included an accessory rail and PET backdrop too. So, how did I build these panels quickly? As with all CET smart symbols, I use the grips. The grips include the circular arrow, which will rotate your panel. The yellow top grip adjusts the panel height. The end grip adjusts the panel width. The yellow arrow and light green arrows can adjust the width and disconnect the panels. And the bright green arrow will flip the panels. For the typicals that you will see here for the couple that I did reference online, I did not import them, so even though I was inspired by them, I was still able to efficiently and quickly build them from scratch. It also helps that hardware is automatically added. I no longer have to worry about finding those connectors or cantilevers, and it's also very easy to change out supports if I need or want to, and I also really love not having to memorize part numbers. So, as mentioned previously, always take your panel heights into consideration. This is the chart that I absolutely love to use. It's available on Technion's website under Specifying. Then you'll go to Leverage, Panels, and Panel App Guide. I love how it shows what the different heights will allow the end users to see in a seated position or even a standing position too. And if you guys need that link, I can provide it to you. For your overlapping spaces and multi-use panels, I recommend using storage banks at the end of your runs, okay? Or think about using a meeting space or a lounge space too. Also think about those shared workspaces with your low storage with cushions, or maybe you'll have a mobile ped with cushion, right? Those are all perfect little impromptu meeting areas and teaming solutions. I feel like it's really nice as an end user to be able to just go and head over to a coworker's desk if you need help with something and to actually have somewhere to sit, right? Especially if it's something that gets a little bit drawn out, I would also think about using glassboard or whiteboard for the exterior elements on your panels. And whenever you are specifying your lounge seating, go ahead and plan to do a laptop table or pull-up table, or possibly even selecting lounge seating that can have a tablet arm included, okay? Just keep in mind that because you are putting these extra little spaces in, you also think about your sound absorption. So try to think about using your PET screens on the top of your panels, or a more common one, of course, would be to use fabric on your panels. So here we have an example of a storage bank that allows for seating and standing height touchdown surface space. The seated height lateral files do not have panels behind them because we don't want people to lean against unsupported panels. I went ahead and used all lateral files here for this design, but of course you can incorporate bookcases and cabinets too. Another extra little added feature that CET has is it will auto adjust to span more than one storage module for your cushions and for your surfaces, which I think is just totally awesome here. And here we have an extra image of the previous typical. I wanted to make sure that you guys could get a better idea of what that integrated height adjustable leg along the spine looks like, as well as the T-leg on the opposite side that is finished off with a gallery panel. In this view, you can also see that there is a very small gap that was added between the panel and storage. This gap is intentional. It was included to give room for the base feed. Definitely cross your fingers that no one loses their pencils down between that gap, but perhaps something to plan ahead for that would be to get a special surface with a small overhang. That way we're not having to worry about people losing stuff back there. Another solution here would be to put the storage on the other end of the typical. Just keep in mind that if you put the storage on the other end of the typical, then you wouldn't be able to have that seated storage. Again, those panels are unsupported because it's up next against a height adjustable surface. So if you go this route, make sure to use your 3-high storage. Also keep in mind that if you have your 3-high storage on the other end, anytime people need to go to the storage bank, they're going to be watching the other people work. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to include the storage where I did for this. Something I wanted to add to this presentation was kind of a catch-all typical. This here is the original sketch I made for a multi-use panel with collaborative spaces at the ends. I made this back when it was very late at night and I was drinking coffee, and it must have just been the best coffee ever, because when I was sketching, I went ahead and drew in a coffee table, and yes, coffee. And this here is the final layout of the sketch from the previous slide. I decided to change the table between the workstations to be round as opposed to a square one, just kind of break up the space a little bit. I also adjusted the workstations to be 8 by 8 instead of 8 by 7. This allowed for the smaller stations on the right to stay consistent with the sizing and panel widths. So by multi-use panels, I mostly mean make the panels usable space. You can do this with whiteboard or metal, or you can use gallery panels that have a glass board mounted to them. Glassboard on a gallery panel would be the perfect solution for an end-of-run benching typical, but for this layout, I decided on metal. Just make sure that if you are using metal, you purchase the magnets from the manufacturer so you can make sure that the magnets actually work. So typically the magnets you're purchasing from the manufacturer are going to be those rare earth magnets. They're heavy duty, they're meant to really hold, right? So we just want to make sure that we get those so that the end users can actually hold up all of their papers that's being discussed by a group, or to even include just little personal notes. And here we have another view showing off the lounge furniture that overlaps with the panels. Truth be told, I really wanted to use whiteboard here, or at least whiteboard on the exterior panels. However, I was weary of expo dusting. I used a lighter fabric on the panels, and I have lounge seating below it as well, and even though it would probably be inexpensive to change out those fabric elements or those cushions, I just didn't want to run the risk of ruining those fabrics, you know? If I had done darker fabrics and done mobile seating or arranged the seating to be off the panels, I would absolutely stick with the whiteboard, but I do have that seating pushed right up against that panel behind it, you know? You guys might remember from the previous slide that we did not have panels behind the seating that was similar to this. The reason being because that panel was unsupported, but since there is a work surface attached to the opposite side of this panel, I have enough support to actually leave that there for people to sit on that bookcase and actually lean against the panel without having any stability issues. I just don't want people leaning against anything unstable. So again, next to like a height adjustable table or just a freestanding panel in general, you know? I also want to mention that the power for this typical is designed to come from a floor core located under one of the lounge chairs. So the seating is elevated to where the power can still reach the panel without interference, and it can still be hidden by it, and I think that is absolutely awesome. And the last view, just showing off the smaller stations that we have with this typical. I feel like for this it would possibly be used for interns or just touchdown stations for those workers that are hybrid. Truth be told, I talked about all of my really cool stuff on the last two slides, but I still wanted to show this off, especially since you can see the lights so well in this rendering. As a right quick, this is how I like to add lighting. I'll go into the lights extension, select the Omni light, and then adjust the elevation and light settings as needed. For the light setting, I just update the brightness range to light bulb, and I'll adjust the brightness to be between 1000 and 1500. I typically use that 1000 for shared overheads just because I don't want the panel underneath it to get too overexposed with lighting, you know? Alrighty, so I just want to take a quick moment to talk about panels and ergonomic accessories. So first off, we have our monitor arms versus glass, right? Please be very careful when selecting monitor arms when you know you're going to have glass behind it, okay? Make sure that you select a monitor arm that can have the range locked at the time of install so that the monitor arms will not hit the glass. And make sure to advise your project manager or lead installer of this as well, okay? Also, with your monitor arms, please think about if you need an edge mount or a grommet mount. So whenever you have your panel system set up, I typically like to do an edge mount just so that I can have the grommet that's most likely in the center to still be utilized for the cables. That's just my personal preference, but of course if you do a grommet mount, just make sure that you know how you are going to wire your stuff, all right? Make sure that you think about your keyboard trays, especially on your height adjustable tables. You're probably going to either need a very short track for your keyboard tray, so it probably won't completely go underneath the table, or you're going to need to have a spacer that can span over the center beam on your height adjustable table, okay? Also think about how those things are going to interact with your support beams and wire management, not just on your height adjustable stuff, but for your fixed height workstations as well. Make sure that if you're doing those tracks that it's not going to interfere with the cantilever, and know that somebody might be just a little off center from where the actual surface is going to be, just depending on how you have all of your stuff run. And then make sure to pay attention how those keyboard trays and supports also interact with your wire management. It's a whole lot to think about. So I know some people will just use like the little cable grips where you can pop the cable up in between, but if you are using a cable tray instead, which I prefer just because you can hold more wires in it, just make sure you know where those are going to go under your surface. Also, speaking of supports, make sure you don't put your grommets on top of your cantilevers. Make sure you also don't put your grommets on top of your storage. Whenever you are specifying your stuff, make sure you know where your grommet location is actually going to be, if you're left, your right, or your center, especially for your center stuff. I know that some manufacturers, they plan it to where their grommets are just a little off center on, like, say a 72-inch wide surface, because they're moving that grommet to plan for there to be a cantilever in between like a 36 and a 36-inch wide panel. So make sure to always think about that whenever you are working with your ergonomic accessories and how those are interacting with all of your components for your workstations, okay? For panel design and elements, make sure you are thinking about your panel heights and change of height conditions. Also make sure you're thinking about your panels versus your gallery panels. Do you want to have those thick, heavy panels at the ends? Do you have to have those, or would it be better to do gallery panels, which are just a little bit smaller, have a smaller footprint for those really tight spaces, you know? And if you are doing a gallery panel, would that be the opportune time to perhaps do the glass mounted to the outside to have an overlapping space, right? When you are planning for your elements themselves, remember that they do not have to be monolithic fabric. Have fun with your laminates, metals, whiteboards, and accessory rails. Have fun with those finishes that you can apply with them too, okay? And always remember that you can play around with your element heights also. So if you have like a low credenza, do you want to have like an accessory rail above it that kind of aligns with some other different material that you have on your panel, something like that, you know? And then also think about your stackers that you can do. Most of the time they're going to be glass, you know, you're frosted or you're clear or you're tinted or whatever else that looks like. Also think about your acrylic and of course your PET too, if that's available. It's a really great solution. I love PET, you guys. And then when you are working on your panel design, also think about the finish of your ceiling feed covers. So I know oftentimes whenever we're specifying, it's really easy to just go ahead and quickly apply our finishes to be the same as on our trims. But if you have these beautiful, dark, moody workstations with dark trims, and if you're placing your workstations within a room that has very bright walls, you know, think about matching the finish of your ceiling feed cover to the walls as opposed to the trim. That way your ceiling feeds kind of disappear into the space, okay? This is one of our redesigned workstations. I really like the original concept, but I did make a few small changes. Those changes include more power, updated storage and supports, a glass stacker, and with all typicals, I added some ergonomic accessories. Everyone, please remember again to plan ahead if you're going to have glass behind a monitor arm, okay? I really feel like this typical is a great catch-all on what we have discussed so far because it has 3 different panel heights and 2 datum heights, as well as 4 different materials. Those materials included tinted glass, tackable fabric, laminate, and metal. So all of our interior panels are that tackable fabric, and the fabric elements have been divided to where the power is located above the work surface. I felt like because this is a fixed height typical, having that power be a little bit more accessible would be, you know, really nice for the end users. The laminate that was used on the exterior panels was added because I felt like it would nicely tie in the laminate gables supporting that main surface. And then I decided to use the metal to help break up the cost of the laminate, as well as align with the horizontal lines created by the glass. If adding glass is something that puts you over budget, then just go ahead and adjust the panel height up a little bit so that it aligns with the bottom of the overhead and the rest of the panels. Lastly, I wanted to point out that the metal element that houses the base feed was changed to better match the laminate too. I feel like that's just a nice little detail to include to elevate any exposed base feeds. So instead of having that stark black, we have something that blends just a little bit better. And here is another design that we have. These panels are mostly 50 inches high with 16-inch high frosted glass. We have 50-inch high gallery panels as well. These gallery panels, as we had mentioned, are fantastic when you are looking to save a little on cost and need a little extra clearance, right? There is a change of height condition for the overheads, and they do match the height of the glass, which I think is great. I feel like this design is also a really good example of actually keeping those monolithic panels without sticking to just the fabric. I also just really wanted to share what my workstation at work looks like. I thought that this would be fun to include, so in case you guys are wondering what 5-star looks like, here you go, lots of color. We've also got some more change of height conditions with the panels and storage, which I think is super fun. Truthfully, if I worked at this workstation, I would absolutely place personal items on top of the storage cabinet, like photos and plants and such. I also really love the accessory rail that was included in here. It just brings in a little bit more color to this workstation, and I think it just ties the design together so nicely. I would like to note though that this color is a custom color, so if I were to actually want this, I would have to check with the manufacturer first, and I'll dive into that just a little bit later on, okay? So here we have another really cool panel base design. As you can see, this is a 4-pack workstation with a fully enclosed height adjustable table base. The individual stations are 8 by 7, so we have exactly 36 inches for the end users to enter and are ideal for 4-pack and 2-pack typicals. This is something that I worked very hard to develop and had to pull all the manufacturer's designers as well as their engineers in on. The reason behind this being, there is not a single cantilever in this layout. So how on earth is this staying up? Of course, along the spine, we have the 66-inch high storage units, which are helping to stabilize the center-mounted overheads. But what about the rest? Lots and lots of storage to panel brackets. Thankfully, the manufacturer already had those, and thankfully the storage unit seen here already had reveals to house these special brackets. Because the case goods are all along the spine, it also had to be installed very carefully because we had those brackets at the top and the bottom on the left and right side of each piece of storage. And then for the credenzas along the corridors, we had to have special reveals placed so that the wing panels could connect to those and so that those wing panels could stay stabilized. We also had to have these credenzas have special cutouts so that we could keep our 1-inch pinch points. It was a lot of work to get this to where it needed to be, but oh my gosh, it is so beautiful. Here is another view of this very beautiful workstation. I would like to point out that I added whiteboard to this one. I was really excited about that. I decided to go ahead and include that whiteboard because we did have that darker fabric underneath the whiteboard, and we also had laminate surfaces as well, so I felt a lot more confident in adding them here. I also really loved how the laminate elements were broken up on the exterior of the panels because I just love how the heights of that laminate matches the height of our tinted glass. And here is the actual workstation being installed. So sadly, due to budget cuts, we actually had to change these workstations to be fixed height. I believe we only ever ordered 3 that had the height adjustable capabilities, but it worked, and it was so amazing in person. Here it is fully installed. This is a single-sided workstation, so the overheads are not center mounted, but everything else is the same. These workstations were truly so beautiful, and because of the laminate, also very expensive, but oh my gosh, I really love them. I hope you guys do too. Here is how I updated the panel elements for all of these amazing panel designs that we've seen so far. Please keep in mind that this might be a manufacturer-specific feature, and different manufacturers may go about this another way. The fantastic thing about CET, though, is the manufacturers do an amazing and fantastic job of providing resources on their websites on how to actually change their panels and change the design of them and tag them and all of that good stuff. So this is how I did it. I used the arrows. So for the blue arrows, those will split your tiles. The red arrow will either move or merge your tiles. And then to update the actual elements, you will probably have a dialog box to the left in CET, like the one that I have shown to the right, where you can just select what you want and apply directly to your panel. If when you go to add that element to your panel and it shows up red, that means that they just can't do it in that size, which means you either need to split your elements again or select something else. Once you have your layout done and panel specified the way you want, it's time to tag your panels. Tagging will differ per manufacturer, but my manufacturer has a setting that auto tags for me. It's just a drop down over in the settings, and I change it from no tag to individual. Just know that your manufacturer may call it run tools. If your manufacturer does not have an auto tagging function or run tools available, then use CET's auto tag function as you place your panels. Just please be sure to adjust your tags as needed while you work so that you don't have to re-tag later down the road. Once all of your panels are tagged, go ahead and draw your panel elevations. My manufacturer also has an option for me to automatically draw my panel types, so if you are using the same as me, you will select Matrix Panel Types, and then adjust the options in the Properties box to what you want to show. I like to show the tile heights and colors. From there, I open the Filtered dialog box and change my options from All to Tagged, and then select the panels for the typical I want to show. In this case, I'll be using Typical 1. Of course, to actually show these tags, we'll have to go through the tools and tag our typicals overall, okay? Again, this might be a manufacturer-specific feature, and different manufacturers may go about this another way. Just be sure to reach out to Configura or check the designer resources for your manufacturer. Finishes and materials. CET makes it incredibly easy to customize finishes with Material Explorer. Be sure to always check with your vendor that your special finish or COM is actually available, and if a client asks for something specific, and if you don't know that they can actually get it, make sure to let them know that you will double check that what they are wanting to do is actually possible. And keep in mind that even if that exact thing really isn't available, you can always substitute it. This includes glass or acrylic. You can always add a film to create an interesting look. Always be sure to utilize your schemes too, and remember to link the schemes you're using to your project, especially if it's for a repeat client. That'll save you so much time whenever you come back to something that you're working on for that repeat client. So here we have an example of a custom acrylic screen that 5-Star did for one of our clients. We ended up going with the blue and green acrylic because when we were originally developing the design, we wanted to match the metal on the panels and the metal on the undermount storage drawers to go ahead and match. So we ended up working closely with our manufacturer to actually develop this so that we could actually apply it. Here we have another view of the blue acrylic that we ended up doing for these typicals. We ended up also matching the height of the acrylic to the height of the laminate that was applied to these panels. You can also see here that we ended up matching the power poles to the walls. Thankfully, this is the same color that we used on our trim pieces. It just ended up working out in our favor. And here we have a close-up of the green acrylic that we did to coordinate along with the blue. It's a little tricky to tell here in this image, but we do have the green applied to the inside of these panels as well to kind of coordinate and match. I think for this, yes, so for this project we actually had 4 different metal colors. So we had a lighter blue that matched the acrylic for the blue there, and then we had a darker blue that kind of contrasted with it, or rather coordinated with it, and then it's the same thing for the green. So for the green, we had the color match perfectly for one color and then a darker shade for the other, which I believe is what's here, which is why it looks just a little bit darker. So how do we actually apply these custom finishes within CET? The way that I like to do it is with the Material Explorer. So you can see here that you have all of your categories that you can choose from with some preloaded ones. Oftentimes, whenever you are working with this, you will want to go ahead and pick something that's similar to what you're trying to get and then modify it from there. So like your categories is, you want to select a similar category, and from there you'll take it into the material lab. Once you have it in material lab and you go to save, it will want you to select which material folder you want it saved in. I highly recommend that when you are saving these to go ahead and sort these by manufacturer as opposed to by project. That way, if you need to use that fabric or finish or whatever else have you in the future, you can easily go and grab it because you already know that manufacturer that has it. So here is the custom paint that I ended up using on the accessory rails that we had earlier shown in this presentation. Again, once you actually pull that material and pull it into the material lab, you'll end up seeing a dialog such as this. You'll be able to add in the file name, the description, and I highly recommend you optimize the texture too. That way you can just have the best renderings possible with that finish that you are wanting. Once you have that custom finish saved and developed, you'll want to go ahead and apply it with your schemes. So schemes should hopefully be pretty familiar to you all, but you'll go and open up your schemes dialog box, and from there you can go ahead and apply all of your finishes, right? So that includes your laminates, paints, fabrics, truly everything that you need. And then if you have to do a custom, you can apply it here as well. So for the finishes and materials that I did for this project here, this presentation for you guys, I ended up using this one for one of the main schemes. This is the scheme that we see for when we're talking about the different elements that we have on the panels and whenever we're going through and talking about tagging our panel types and everything such as that. I also wanted to provide a color palette that was kind of inspired by Arizona, you know, just a little desert. That's where this custom blush came from. Here we have our third scheme that we had used for the multi-use panel example. Here are the finishes that we have on our workstations down at 5-star. The ones that I showed it was the workstations that have the green on it, but we also have some with bright yellows. We also have some blues in our office. It really is just a very colorful and fun space. This scheme was a little bit moodier than all of the rest. So we have a darker laminate, we have the deep black trims here, the dark blues on our panels, the Chimera blazer that was used on the credenza cushions, and then we also have the rust that was used on the desk chairs. So for our budget-friendly solutions, please remember that you don't have to shy away from having a beautiful workstation just because you have a budget that's smaller. There are always ways to value engineer a workstation that is beautiful and gorgeous and still within budget. So Ways to do that would be like with the monolithic panels. That's what 5-star did. We did the fabric down along the spine, and then we did the laminate on the wing panels. We also ended up using non-tackable fabric along the spine. So, of course, I will always prefer to have a tackable fabric, but if cost is truly an issue, then use a non-tackable one like we did. Also remember that if you put the power in the wings, it's going to be more expensive. So try to keep the power in the spine and think about how you actually need to lay out your workstations. That way your power can run down the spine only. Please also remember that if you are still trying to bring color in a fun way, then maybe think about doing the metal on the exterior of your runs. That way you can still have it without having to use expensive laminates or something like that, or using an expensive fabric on a mobile ped. Think about better ways that you can actually incorporate fun colors while still maintaining your budget, right? That's also part of the reason why I put the fun metal on the accessory rail. So even though accessory rails can get a little pricey, I suppose, depending on the accessories that you include with it, it's still a better way to incorporate color than perhaps pulling in a mobile ped, because those are always going to be more expensive than your stationary ones. Also, when you are developing all of your designs, use your alternatives. So you can show a whole floor plan in 2 different ways and easily price those floor plans 2 different ways. So if there is something that you know your client is going to love, but you're worried about the budget, then maybe show it in comparison to another layout, you know, so show them like, hey, if we end up doing this fun element on our panels as opposed to this, it'll only be X dollars more, okay? And then once you have that developed, populate your initial floor plan using your replicate tools. They're a huge time saver, and it also lets you quickly just show how everything needs to fit within your space. All right, so here is the 3rd typical I did as a redesign. For this design, the panels are 50 inches high with 12-inch high frameless frosted glass. Elements are fabric and laminate. I also removed the lateral files and added bookcases, cabinets, and a mobile ped with cushion. The pedestal does have a metal case to tie in with the metal shelving and a laminate front to look cohesive with the rest of the below surface storage. I really love this design, but once I got through it, I realized that it isn't very budget friendly. So a few quick cost savings items I should have thought about when I originally did this includes perhaps changing the frosted glass to clear or possibly acrylic, or maybe I should have just removed it in general, you know. Another thing I could have considered was keeping the storage all metal, or changing the pedestal from mobile to fixed. I already have seating with this workstation, right? So truly that mobile ped with cushion was just to kind of to bring in more of that pretty blue color that I love so much. I think that perhaps the biggest thing I want to talk about though is the power. So like I had mentioned on the previous slide, it's best to have your power on the spine from a cost perspective. You might notice here that I have the power above and below the peninsula surfaces. So to get this power to connect, I would have power running through all of these panels. So I think in the future, or if I were to actually take this to a client, it would be better for me to actually put the power along the back of the panels, like having those 2 panels either right next to each other or above and below on that corner panel to have that power instead, and then just use some really good wire management, and then to bring power to the end user, just add on clamp on power data USB. Of course, if I were to take that route, I would need to make sure that I ended up having a power module with a long enough cord. So definitely for this, I would need at least the 120 inch as opposed to like a 72 or something. Just right quick, I would like to cover how to design without smart symbols. There will be occasions where you have a panel system that you want to use, but the panels are not smart. So if something like this were to occur, then you would really kind of need to treat it more like AutoCAD, okay? So it's possible, just know that it's going to take longer because you will actually need to insert all of your panels and your tiles and connectors and everything else individually, right? So make sure that if this is something you have to do, have the patience to do it and give yourself enough time. The rendering shown here was for a typical for a 14 pack, and it was very time consuming. So the way that I ended up making this a little bit faster was I ended up building out the spine and then just copied it down for each station. Same thing with the wings. I ended up developing the wing panels and then copied those down along. To actually build out those panels, I had to also change the heights for the elements. You can, of course, do that within the dialog box if it pops up like how high of an elevation that, or you would need to use your page up, page down on your keyboard to do that, okay? And from there, for the actual furniture itself, go ahead and place it and then maybe use like a CAD 0 point. That way you can make sure you're putting it in the exact place that it needs to be for each workstation, so you can make sure everything is staying aligned. And then, so long as the symbols are actually within CET, so like with Catalog Browser, use the dialog box to apply those finishes. If that's unavailable, then use the Material Lab. Again, it's a very time-consuming process, so plan ahead and know that if this is something that's not in Catalog Browser, you would then have to use the Commercial Interiors library. For our additional space division options, remember that not all space division has to be done with panels. You can also use space division with floor screens and dividers, ceiling mounted screens, and planters. So for floor screens and dividers, keep in mind that your floor screens can of course be stationary or mobile. Whenever you are planning with your floor screens, also remember that they're double-sided, so you can do like glassboard on one side and PET on another, or more popular I've seen is whiteboard on one side and a TV mount on the other. So get creative with those floor screens, and just keep in mind that if you do a TV mount and it's mobile, make sure that the end users know that of course they're going to have to unplug the TV so that they don't actually cause damage to the cord. And if you are doing a TV mount on one of your screens, make sure that your client knows what size monitor to use. Of course, there's also large decorative open shelving. I actually really love the look of it, especially if it's lined with plants. That's what I have here. In my rendering, I also showed a couple of awards and some more decorative items too. There's also your ceiling mounted screens. Oftentimes you're going to see those screens be PET, and they're also going to be on tracks, and you can mount those to truly pretty much anything, a drop ceiling grid on trusses or drywall with studs and anchors. Just make sure to coordinate with the manufacturer for those screens, how you need to go about doing that, and then of course relay that information to your project manager or lead installer. I really do love these. I think they're a lot of fun. I think you can do a lot of cool designs with them, and of course, as always, it helps with your sound absorption, so really good for better defining those large open spaces. And it's also really fun when they can actually slide on tracks to actually like open and close off spaces like corner meeting areas or something along those lines. Another great option for space division is, of course, planters. This is probably my favorite way to utilize space division because it is also great for the wellness of the end users. And I also just really love to bring the outdoors in when given the opportunity. So I really love this layout. Truth be told, I have only been able to use planters for space division in a lobby setting so far, but I'm excited for when I'll have the opportunity to use planters in an open office setting like this one. As a note, the planters shown in this rendering are dry planters, so fake plants only. I'm sure you all know this already, but if you try to use real plants with a dry planter and you go to water those plants, you are going to ruin the planter. So just something to keep in mind for whenever you go to specify. For the examples shown here, I did place the planters along the spine. My understanding is there are now manufacturers that have it to where their planters are integrated on the spine, which is amazing. But for here, I have the workstations split into two with the planters running down the center. I really do love this, but just keep in mind that if your manufacturer is like mine and they don't have planters specifically designed to run down the spine, you are doubling the cost of the panels and of course the power too. So just something to think about if you're looking to do something like this. For this example, I have placed the planters on the end of the runs. I did this layout so that I can show something a little more cost effective. Just keep in mind that if you place the planters on the end of the runs, you may want to use clear glass on the wing panels. I only say this because you'll probably have a few end users that might want to touch them or play with them, and while we do want to provide wellness for them, we're not really trying to provide distraction, so something to think about. And like the storage and seating, planters are a great way to hide your base feeds. Also, just as a heads up, if you're wanting to use this in a medical center and you want to cover the bottom of your planter with rocks, make sure you find a way to keep the rocks from being picked up by patients. We have been told this before, and we found that the best way to plan for this is to just coat it with epoxy, okay? And then also, if you are doing plants, especially fake plants, make sure to let the end users know that they will need to hire a cleaning service to keep the plants clean. So something to think about, especially for like the longevity for the care of these plants. Technicalities to consider when designing with your panels. This is my personal checklist. This is what I like to run off of whenever I do anything for panel-based designs. Always know how you are going to get power to your workstations, base feed in the floor or wall, or a ceiling feed. Always ask the client if they need power, data, both, or none. We do have some situations where we might not actually need power and data. 5-star is one of those places. Because it's only 2 stations and it's right next against the wall, we can just pull our power directly from that. Also note if you need a power break in your stations. Do not overload your circuits. Always make sure that you plan ahead for that. And of course, always quote your task lights and wire management. And always ask how many stations are needed up front so that you can size your workstations accordingly. You don't want to develop these large, beautiful workstations for this gorgeous open space just to find out that you need to make them smaller or downsize or replan something because you didn't get that information up front. So if you're working with a large floor plate, make sure to get that information from the get-go. Also, when you get close towards the end, if you have special storage or finishes, make sure that all of that has been confirmed, that it's available by the vendor, and that it's been quoted by them as well. Also, make sure to always key alike. All of our manufacturers like to key alike differently, so make sure you know how to do that as you proceed with wrapping up your designs and spec checks. And just right quick, a rendering that I did showcasing these workstations. It's a different color palette, but you might recognize these as being the same workstations that had our fun little desert color palette applied to it. Panel-based designs have the capability to be beautiful and functional, so make sure to utilize CET in a smart and efficient way so that you can showcase all of your amazing designs that you are working on. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and I really appreciate you all listening to me talk about my love of panels.